General Hospital teasers for the week of August 25th to 29th promise some explosive scenes, including Stella Henry's arrest, Ava Jerome knocking out Rick Lansing cold, and Rocco Falconeri and Danny Morgan discovering a supposedly unresponsive body. The ABC soap recently revealed its weekly preview for the week of August 25th, and fans should prepare for some amazing drama over the next 5 days. The promotion begins strong, with the two agents from the New York State Office of Fraud returning to the hospital. With Curtis Ashford by her side near the nurse's station, one of the agents comes and says, "Stella Henry, you are under arrest." Stella appears surprised and scared. As the GH teaser progresses, a hot scene is seen at Alexis Davis's house, but she is not present. With that stated, in an unusual twist, Rick and Ava are having a fight in the presence of Christina Corinthos Davis. Ava is extremely enraged as she screams at Rick, "You betrayed me!" While Rick answers, "Nah, you betrayed me first, dear." As Rick turns around, Ava, enraged, takes a piece of home decor, a silver ball on Alexis's table, and smacks Rick on the back of the head. He immediately collapses to the ground, leaving a crimson, bloody mark on the back of his head. Christina looks at Ava, absolutely speechless. The scene immediately cuts to a shot of Danny and Rocco at the docks, gazing out over the lake. The youths appear to be taking a break from their work at the Metro Court pool, as Danny squints and informs his brother from a different mother, "I believe that's a body." Immediately following Danny's comment, a montage of clips appears on the screen, one by one, with powerful violin music playing in the background. The first image shows Nina Reeves turning her head, irritated, followed by Alexis, who appears caught off surprise. Jocelyn Jacks appears to be hunched down somewhere at the Five Poppies Resort, terrified, and the final scene shows Portia Robinson tossing something in her office as she has yet another meltdown, most likely caused by Drew Kane. General Hospital spoilers indicate that the final week of August will be unforgettable. Nevertheless, the real questions here are who is the body in the lake that Danny discovers, and will Rick be okay? General Hospital teasers indicate that a preview clip has been released for the week of August 25th, 2025. It depicts Rocco Falconeri and Danny Morgan making a terrible find. Ava Jerome and Christina Corinthos Davis are in an unusual scenario together. In addition, Stella Henry has been arrested. Continue reading, and let's discuss what's coming up on the ABC soap drama. Ava Jerome's killer move. Let us start with Ava and Christina. They're conversing with Rick Lansing. Rick and Ava seem to face Christina. Then the betrayals are revealed. First, Ava becomes distraught about Rick's betrayal. However, the lawyer claims she betrayed him first. Then Ava reaches for a spherical decorative piece. Then she hits him over the head with it. Christina Corinthos Davis packed. Christina looks around in complete disbelief. This will push Ava and Christina to form a pact. It could also force Ava to discontinue her blackmail against Alexis Davis. Of course, these two will have a lot to work out. Christina and Ava have a long and volatile history. Adolescent's terrible discovery. General Hospital spoilers for the week of August 25th hint that the preview clip includes some adolescents making a terrible discovery. Danny and Rocco are out at night when one of them inquires whether that is a body. Could this be Rick's body or someone else's? Stella Henry's arrest. There is also Stella, who is in the hospital alongside Curtis Ashford. The fraud investigators claim that Stella is being arrested. So, of course, Curtis will go on the offensive. I believe it is a good idea for him to forge an alliance with Martin Gray. Martin may not be well known, but he was the closest person to Drew Kane's plans. Martin could possibly provide insight into Drew's thinking. The discovery of a body in Port Charles has elicited shocking reactions. Nina Reeves and Alexis are there, looking astonished. The closing scene has Portia Robinson flinging things around in her office. That lady takes her wrath out on her medical office. Which narrative are you most looking forward to witnessing in the week of August 25th, 2025? Share your opinions in the comments area below. Remember to keep watching ABC soap operas to see what happens next. The alley was silent now, except for the distant hum of the city and the faint drip of a leaking pipe nearby. Ava's boots scratched against the ground as she moved back, her gaze fixed on Rick's still figure. She wasn't sure how long she remained there, her mind racing as she tried to figure out what had led to this point. Rick had always been trouble charming, yes, but the kind that disguised a snake. He had been pushing her buttons for weeks, ever since she began looking into warehouse discounts. He'd advised her to avoid asking inquiries about the shipments that arrived at night and were never discussed. But Ava was not the sort to back down. She grew up in this city, learning its rhythms and mysteries. She recognized when something was amiss, and the warehouse reeked of it. Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of footsteps, rapid and uneven, coming from the alley's mouth. She tensed, reflexively grabbing for the knife in her belt. The footsteps ceased, and a man appeared from the shadows. It was Rocco, his face pallid and eyes wide with what appeared to be panic. "Ava," he whispered, his voice low and desperate. "You have to come with me. Now." She remained still, her gaze shifting between Rocco and Rick's bodies. "What is going on?" she questioned, her voice firm despite the knot in her gut. Rocco did not respond right away. He looked at Rick and then back at her, his countenance hardening. "It's Danny," he announced finally. "He's dead." The word struck her like a second punch. Danny was her friend, confidant, and the only person she trusted to help her sort through the mess Rick had created. She'd seen him just hours before, smiling over a beer at a dingy pub on 12th Street and vowing to meet her later with anything he discovered on the warehouse records. "What do you mean by dead?" she inquired, her voice sharper now, cutting through the fog. Rocco shook his head, his hands quivering, and motioned for her to follow. "Please come." She paused, looking back at Rick. He was still out, his breathing was shallow but consistent. She did not want to leave him here, especially in this situation, but Rocco's eagerness drew her in. Whatever happened to Danny, it was significant, and it was linked to the same filth she'd been digging up. She followed Rocco, her boots booming in the tiny alley as they walked towards the riverbank. The city loomed around them, its lights twinkling like stars against the black sky, oblivious to the chaos happening below. They got to the outskirts of the warehouse district, where the river odor combined with the smell of oil and rust. Rocco led her to a little abandoned property, hidden behind a row of shipping containers. The ground was littered with rubbish, including shattered glass, cigarette butts, and a rusting bicycle wheel. Danny's body lay half-hidden in the darkness. He was slumped against a concrete barrier, his head drooping to one side, his eyes open but unfocused. Blood coated his clothing, crimson and spreading, and pooled beneath him. Ava's stomach churned, but she forced herself to stare and absorb every detail. His hands were curled into loose fists, as if he had attempted to fight back. His chest was struck by a single bullet wound that was accurate and devastating. "Who did this?" she inquired, her voice barely above a whisper. Rocco didn't respond. He was staring at the body, jaw tense, hands deep in his pockets. "Rocco," she shouted sharply, stepping toward him. "Who did this?" He shook his head, his gaze darting about the lot, as if he expected someone to emerge from the shadows. "I do not know, Ava. I discovered him like this. I was coming to meet you, and this." His voice cracked as he gestured helplessly at Danny's body. "We have to get out of here. Whoever did this could still be around." Ava's thoughts were racing. Danny was onto something major, something that may get him killed. She knelt alongside him, her fingers brushing over the jacket. There was a crumpled piece of paper in his pocket, stained with blood but still legible. She took it out, her hands trembling as she opened it. It was a shipping manifest, one of the documents she had asked him to look at. Names, dates, and cargo details, none of which made sense on their own, but enough to corroborate her suspicions. The warehouse was more than just a facade. It was the core of something far larger, something people were willing to die for. Before she could analyze it further, headlights flashed over the lot, followed by the faint rumble of an engine. Ava shoved the manifest into her jacket and stood, her heart racing. "Rocco, we need to move," she murmured, but he had already backed away, his gaze riveted on the oncoming truck. It was a black unmarked vehicle that screamed trouble. The automobile came to a halt, and two individuals emerged, cops, their badges glinting in the faint light. But something about them seemed wrong. They weren't moving like typical patrol cops. Their feet were too precise, and their gaze were too focused. "Hands where we can see them," one of them demanded, his voice calm yet demanding. Ava raised her hands slowly, her mind scrambling for an out. Rocco did the same, his face paler and his breathing irregular. "What's happening here?" the second cop inquired, his gaze shifting between Ava, Rocco, and Danny's body. "We got a call about a disturbance." Ava's stomach plummeted. A call? From whom? She hadn't heard anything, and the alley was quite silent when she left Rick. "We found him like this," Rocco remarked abruptly, his voice quivering. "We didn't do anything." The first cop approached, his hand resting on the holster at his hip. "Is that so?" he replied, his gaze narrowing as he peered at Ava. "You look like you've been in a fight." She remained silent, her jaw clenched. The bruising on her knuckles were impossible to conceal, and Rick's blood was likely still on her hands. The cop's eyes lingered before shifting to Danny's physique. "Looks like we've got a homicide here," he replied nonchalantly. "And you two are standing right next to it." Ava's mind raced. She felt the trap closing around her. Whoever killed Danny had planned this, and she'd stepped right into it. The cops were already reaching for their handcuffs, their moves professional and almost rehearsed. "Turn around," the first cop said, his tone leaving no space for dispute. Ava looked to Rocco, but he was transfixed, his eyes wide with horror. She had no choice. She turned around, her hands behind her back, the cold metal of the cuffs cutting into her wrists as they clicked shut. The journey to the station was a blur. The cops didn't say much, but exchanged glances in the front seat, while Ava and Rocco sat quietly in the back. Her mind was racing, attempting to piece together what had happened. Rick, Danny, and the manifest were all interconnected, but she lacked the necessary information to make sense of it. Not yet. When they arrived, the station was buzzing with activity, with cops coming and going, phones ringing, and voices overlapping. Ava was escorted to a holding cell, her cuffs removed but the weight remaining on her skin. Rocco was brought somewhere else, perhaps to be questioned separately. Hours, possibly more, passed. The cell was small, the walls were dark and soiled, and the air smelled of sweat and disinfectant. Ava sat on the edge of the bench, her brain working overtime. She needed to get out and find out who killed Danny and why. The manifest was still in her jacket. She'd managed to hide it throughout the search, but it wouldn't help her if she was locked here. And then there was Rick. If he'd wake up and talked, he could blame everything on her. She had knocked him out after all. That was not something she could readily explain. The cell block door opened and a woman stepped inside. She was tall, her hair tied back into a tight bun, and her expression was unreadable. "Ava," she murmured, her voice stern, like if she was accustomed to being obeyed. "I'm Detective Stella," Ava said, her guard up. She didn't trust cops, especially those that turned up in the middle of the night and seemed to already have her figured out. "What do you want?" Ava inquired, keeping her tone neutral. Stella did not respond right away. She moved closer, her gaze scanning Ava as if she were reading a book. "You're in a lot of trouble," she said finally. "Dead body, blood on your hands, and a witness who says you were fighting with him just before he went down." Ava's pulse was racing. "Rick." He awoke and spoke. "That's not what happened," she answered calmly, despite the panic growing in her chest. "Rick was alive when I left him. And Danny, I did not kill him." Stella lifted an eyebrow, suspicious. "Is that your story?" she asked. "Because things aren't looking good for you. We found your prints on a knife near the scene, and a witness claims you had a motivation." Ava's blood raced cold. A knife? She had not placed her knife anywhere near Danny's body. Someone was setting her up, and they were making an excellent job of it. "I want a lawyer," she stated, her voice steely. Stella smirked as if she had expected this. "You'll get one," she replied. "But it won't help you much. We have enough to detain you, and we're only getting started." As Stella went, the cell door clanged shut behind her, reverberating in Ava's ears. She sank back onto the bench, her thoughts whirling. Someone had murdered Danny, put her up, and now she was trapped. The manifest was her sole lead, but she couldn't do much with it from here. She needed to get out, find Rocco, and learn what Rick knew. However, the walls were closing in and the clock was ticking. She had no idea who she could trust, but one thing was certain. Whomever was behind this wasn't finished yet. The hours went on, each one heavier than the last. Ava's thoughts kept going back to the warehouse, the goods, and the names on the manifest. She didn't have all the information, But she knew it wasn't only about Danny and Rick. It was larger, deeper, and went through the city itself. She reflected on her upbringing, growing up in the shadow of the warehouses, seeing the trucks come and go, never asking questions since that was how you survived. But she was no longer a child, and she would not stop asking questions. Ava had a plan by the time the first light of dawn shone through her cell's little window. It was not much, but it was something. She'd find a way to get the manifest to someone she could trust. Someone from outside the city, perhaps, who could delve deeper without being trapped in the web. She would consult with her lawyer, play the game, and buy herself time. And when she got out, as she would, she'd discover the truth. About Danny, Rick, and the warehouse. She'd demolish it all if she had to. The sound of footsteps interrupted her thoughts. Another cop, this one younger and less certain of himself. "You've got a visitor," he announced, unlocking the cell. Ava stood with her heart beating. A visitor? She hadn't anticipated anyone, especially this soon. She followed the officer down the hallway, her thoughts racing with possibilities. Was this Rocco? Did he find anything? Or was it someone else, someone involved in the situation she was in? The officer brought her into a small room where a man sat waiting. He was elderly, his face wrinkled from years of worry, yet his eyes were sharp and calculated. "Ava," he continued, his voice low, nearly whispering, "we need to talk." She didn't recognize him, but something about his tone indicated he wasn't here to help. She sat across from him, her guard up, and the manifest burned a hole in her pocket. Whatever happened next, she was prepared. Or she had to be. Stella never expected her day to end in handcuffs, yet there she was, paralyzed in amazement as Port Charles police encircled her at the docks. Her breath rushed out in rapid rushes, and her mind spun as she struggled to comprehend what had just transpired. She had been arguing with Curtis about the latest round of betrayals in their family, when the flashing lights blinded her, and an officer read her rights. The words hardly registered, but she knew it wasn't a misunderstanding. Someone had made sure Stella would take the blame for something greater, and as they pulled her hands behind her back, she noticed Curtis' astonished expression in the distance. He wanted to move forward, defend her, but Jordan stopped him, her face pallid and filled with silent fear. This wasn't just an arrest, it was the start of a well-planned takedown, and Stella felt deep down that Ava Jerome was involved. Ava had been playing a deadly game for weeks, silently moving pieces across the board while everyone else in Port Charles was too preoccupied with their own problems to notice. The gallery owner had long realized that survival wasn't about strength, but about remaining 3 steps ahead of everyone else. And now, as she sipped wine in her apartment while watching the breaking news of Stella's arrest, she allowed herself a tiny smirk. This was exactly what she wanted. With Stella out of the way, there would be less barriers between her and the control she desired. However, Ava's killer move was not just about power, but also about protection. Something she had done was buried deep in the turmoil of secrets unraveling in Port Charles, something that if revealed would entirely destroy her. Stella had unknowingly come dangerously near to the truth, and Ava had no intention of exposing her. Meanwhile, across town, Rocco and Danny had chosen to flee the Quartermain estate after overhearing whispers about something unusual happening on Spoon Island. The boys expected it to be an exciting and harmless adventure, their own kind of mystery solving. They had no idea what they were walking into. The night air was cool, and the route down to the coastline was damp beneath their sneakers, but they were too excited to notice. Danny, who always had a borderline reckless curiosity, insisted on taking the long route around the cliffs to avoid being noticed by the adults. Rocco paused, looking back at the fading mansion lights in the distance, but eventually followed his cousin deeper into the shadows. When they approached the island's edge, they came to a quick halt, frozen by the strange calm that lingered over the region. There are no birds, no breeze, and no sound other than the quiet, continuous cadence of water lapping against the rocks. And suddenly they saw it. A dark form leaned against the rocks, partially obscured by seaweed and shadows. Danny initially believed it was probably wreckage from a boat accident, but as they got closer, the horrible truth became clear. A body. Cold. Motionless. Rocco's stomach churned as he grabbed Danny's arm and tried to pull him back, but it was too late. The horrible scene was burnt into their minds, the pale complexion, the large cut on the person's temple, and the way one hand clutched something fiercely long after death. Neither of them recognized the victim right away, but Danny's senses told him this wasn't a coincidence. Something awful had occurred here, and someone wanted it buried. Panicking, Rocco murmured that they needed to go and find an adult right away, but Danny shook his head, his face pallid but resolute. "No," he muttered. "If we inform anyone right now, the person who did this will know what we witnessed. They could come for us." His words quiver, but his reasoning was chillingly sound. Instead of racing back, the guys stooped low to study the situation as quietly as possible. That's when Danny noticed something bright near the victim's outstretched fingers. A broken piece of jewelry partially buried in sand. He grabbed for it with shaky hands, pulling out a dainty bracelet inscribed with a name neither of them expected. AJ. The finding stunned them. AJ's bracelet had gone lost years before, and the thought that it had resurfaced here, next to a dead body, made their stomachs turn. Back at the PCPD, Jordan Ashford stared at the evidence on her desk, unable to shake the gnawing suspicion that was eating away at her insides. The entire Stella arrest felt overly pristine and carefully wrapped, as if every element had been meticulously prepared. Jordan knew her aunt better than anyone else, and while Stella was loud, frank, and fearless of confrontation, she was not a criminal. The trouble was that the evidence suggested differently. Stella was identified by a blood-stained scarf, surveillance footage showing her near the docks at the time of the murder, and an anonymous voicemail in which Stella was heard threatening someone. It was airtight. Too airtight. Curtis refused to accept it, pacing the precinct like a caged animal, demanding answers Jordan couldn't provide. He couldn't ignore the suspicion that Ava was involved, especially after overhearing a chat between her and Austin at the Metro Court a few days earlier. He remembered how Ava's voice dropped when she said, "Once Stella's out of the way, everything falls into place." It wasn't proof, but it was enough to pique his interest. At Windmere, Ava peered out over the water, her mind racing as she planned her next move. She had expected Stella's imprisonment to afford her time, but she hadn't considered the unknown elements, particularly Rocco and Danny. They were an unexpected wild card, and if they started chatting, her meticulously crafted plans could unravel quickly. She had no idea what they had discovered, but if it was even somewhat related to her, she needed to find out before anyone else. Danny called Sam from across town in a panic. His speech was unsteady and strained, unlike anything she had heard from her son before. "Mom, we found something," he muttered, barely able to say it. Sam pressed him for information, but he refused to disclose over the phone, insisting she come to Spoon Island right away. Fear gripped her chest as she grabbed her keys and ran out the door, calling Jason along the way. When Sam and Jason arrived, the guys took them silently down the rough trail until they reached the location where they had made their horrifying discovery. But when they arrived, the body was gone. Only a black, wet stain remained on the rocks, along with Danny's shattered bracelet, which he had shoved into his pocket for safety. Jason's jaw tightened as he looked around. Whoever had been here before had returned to clean up, which implied someone was keeping an eye on them. Jason immediately called Spinelli and demanded that he investigate any activity on Spoon Island within the last 24 hours. Meanwhile, Sam held Danny close, but her mind was filled with unanswered concerns. If the body had been relocated, where did it go? And most importantly, why? Later that night, as the tension grew in Port Charles, Ava got an unexpected visit. When she opened the door, her breath stopped in her throat. Sonny Corinthos. His mere presence was enough to disturb her frigid calm, and the expression in his eyes told her he knew more than he was letting on. Without saying anything, Sonny came inside and handed her a manila envelope. "I think you've been busy," he continued, his voice low and menacing. The mail contained grainy images of Ava meeting with someone late at night near the docks, the same night Stella was reportedly involved in the event that resulted in her incarceration. Ava's demeanor remained neutral, but her pulse sped. Sonny's hidden warning was clear. He was monitoring her and wasn't going to let her do anything that would endanger his family, or anybody else he cared about. But Ava wasn't going to back down either. She pretended to be innocent, claiming she had no idea what he was talking about, despite the fact that both of them knew otherwise.